Over 1,700 new millionaires are created every single day in the US alone, and more than double that across the globe. They're people from all walks of life, most of them people just like you and I. So the big question is this: how are so many people who didn't inherit money or have any special advantages overcoming the odds and becoming millionaires? That's the question, and this show will give you the answers. My name is Jeff Lerner, and welcome to Millionaire Secrets. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Millionaire Secrets. Your host, Jeff Lerner, excited to be with you as always. And I am extra excited today because our guest is not only an amazing guest, he's also a friend. He's also one of my earliest influences and inspirations when I got into digital marketing. And he's a well-known guy who was actually gracious enough to have me on his show recently. Mr. Mike Dillard, welcome to Millionaire Secrets.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Jet, brother. Appreciate it. I apologize if there is a big echo. We're in a brand new house, and this room has a really bad echo, so I'm a little concerned about it. But hopefully, it's coming through okay.
No, it actually sounds fine.
Cool.
You must have a good mic there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Mike, right before I hit record, I was just remarking, in a way, sometimes it's harder to interview people that you know, because it's like, there's so many things I could ask you about. And, you know, especially for you, you're not only a friend, but like also you were one of my earliest professional influences in this part of my career. So yeah, there's so much. I think we're just going to do our best.
Yeah, let's just have fun.
Touch on the things that give maximum value. So the intent of my show is to really try to mine. I mean, it's called Millionaire Secrets, right? So like we're going to mine the secrets and unlock. You know, I'll bet you're not the only 20-something waiter at P.F. Chang's that has big dreams. For some reason, yours hit. You know, it's like, what's the X factor? What's the difference? What makes Mike Dillard Mike Dillard? So that's what we're going to dig into. But also, selfishly, I have a million things I've never actually gotten to ask you. So
Cool.
Let's back it up if we could. Can we go back to P.F. Chang's or even earlier? I mean, whatever
Sure.
you feel like was the gestation of this career that you've built for yourself. Can you take us back and just kind of briefly describe that time?
Yeah, real easy. It was born in high school. And so I used to mountain bike professionally. I used to race in the Texas State Championship Series in high school. And so I would come home from school and I'd go train 30 to 50 miles a day out on the Texas hill country, roads and trails. And then on the weekends, I would work at the original Romano's Macaroni Grill in Boerne, Texas, before it was turned into a chain and bought by Brinker. Really cool experience. But, I'd work there Friday and Saturday night and Sunday and to pay for bike gear and racing stuff. And I wouldn't get home on the weekends sometimes till 1:30 in the morning. And when you come home from that, you want to kind of decompress a little bit. And this is in the mid to late 90s. And, there was no YouTube, there was no social media at that time. So I'd come home and I'd turn on the television, and at 1 or 2 in the morning on a weekend, there's nothing on TV except infomercials.
Right.
And so I would come from this job that I really didn't enjoy. I didn't like being told when I had to work, how long I had to work, and how much I could make. And then I'd come home and I'd see these infomercials with Tony Robbins and Carlton Sheets and all of these guys. And I'd get this little seed planted that, hey, there's other options out there. And so that's really where the seed got planted, is that I don't have to go get a job, when this is open, when I'm out of school. I can do something else. And so that really gave me the bug. And the dissatisfaction of having a boss was really the pain that drove me to pursue that avenue. And that was the start of everything. And so after that, went to college. But really the only opportunity that was available back then, again, I went to school from 96 to 2000, went to Texas A&M, was network marketing, right? There was no digital marketing as we know it. There was no, there were no funnels. There was no YouTube. There was no Facebook or, any of that. So to be able to start a business for $100, $200, $300, your only option back then was network marketing. And so that's where I got my start, and failed at it miserably for 5 years, didn't make a dollar, jumped from company to company, absolutely sucked at it. But the pain of having to think about getting a job and working in a career and making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year was infinitely more painful than failing, in these business ventures. So I kept at it for a good 5 or 6 years until I finally figured it out. And the figuring it out part for me was, I realized that the opportunity was not going to make me wealthy. The upline wasn't going to make me wealthy. The product wasn't going to make me wealthy. And that's what I always thought was going to bring success previously. And so in each of these companies that I would go to, there were people walking across the stage getting awards and making millions of dollars. And yet I wasn't making any money. And so I became the common denominator after moving from company to company. And I finally realized that the issue is with me. It's not with the business opportunity. And why are all of these other people succeeding when I'm not? And I finally realized that they had all become masters at their craft. They had all earned the right to become a professional in that industry. And they had become world-class speakers or world-class salespeople or whatever it may be, but they were masters of a skill set. And I had not pursued mastery of any kind. I had just pursued opportunity. So I realized that. And at that point, I decided to go out and become a master of new skills. And for me, those skills were salesmanship in the form of copywriting, because I was very shy and introverted at the time. The thought of going to a network marketing event of any kind or recruiting people in person was absolutely terrifying. So I needed to figure out how to sell through the written word indirectly. And copywriting was the skill I discovered that allows you to do that. And then Google AdWords. And so I taught myself how to then generate traffic. And learning those two skills, which took me about a year and a half of buying every book and course I could on how to do that, really empowered me, and it gave me the skills to take action. Action led to results. Results led to confidence. Confidence created the spiral of more action, more results, more confidence. And that's at the time I was waiting tables at P.F. Chang's. So I'm about 24, 25 years old at this point. And went from doing that to making 7 figures in about 18 months once I made that realization and started chasing skills instead of opportunity.
Man, chasing skills instead of opportunity. Like, you literally just summed up for me, here we are, 20 years later. That's still the number one misconception and delusion, particularly on the internet where I tend to operate, is people chasing opportunities instead of working on, like you said, the common denominator in all opportunities, which is themselves and their skills. And actually, Mike, if you'll permit me, I have to share this. I had this, what felt like a pretty cool revelation earlier. I was on I was on somebody else's podcast, and this lady is a divorce attorney, and she puts out a lot of training around how to deal with narcissists. And as we were talking, I was like, narcissist. Okay. Someone who, if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, how's that going to show up? They're going to want to control your time. They're going to want to control where you go. They potentially going to want to control what you wear. They're going to use money to control you, how much you're allowed to have, their allowance or whatever. And then I was like, wait, am I describing a narcissist or am I describing a job? It's the same thing. Your relationship with a job, if it was a person, you'd call it a narcissist because they're trying to control everything about you.
Yeah, I could have used that advice 10 years ago.
Yeah. Anyway, it hit me like a ton of bricks, and it was like, hey, I am doing good work. I'm not just a radical with a disruptive agenda. I'm literally liberating people from narcissistic relationships.
Nice.
It feels good. Anyway, I thought you'd appreciate that analogy.
More than you know.
So, and I also have to congratulate you that Tony Robbins and Carlton Sheets, at least you gravitated towards two of the more legitimate infomercials. My first two my first two infomercials were Don Lapre.
I bought that too.
And Kevin Trudeau. Yeah. Who, let's just say they've both run into many more legal troubles than your two guys. So good on having discernment about your infomercials. But, so when was it that you kind of realized like, hey, I need to have these skills. I need to focus on these skills. What year?
Just after 5 years of failing, right? So this was around 2004, 2003, 2004. So I failed all through college, a few years after college. And I just I hit my breaking point. I was like, look, I've got to figure out how to do this differently. And I've been doing this for 5 years and I haven't made any money yet. And this isn't working. So I either have to figure out how to make this work or I have to go do something different, which I didn't want to do because then I'd feel like I'd thrown 5 years of my life away at that point. And thankfully, a mentor of mine told me at that time, he's like, man, if you want to make 50 grand a month, which was my like lifelong goal at the time, I was like, well, I can never get to $50,000 a month. That's more money than anyone in my family tree has ever made. Like I will have made my mark, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what he was making at the time. So I knew it was possible. That's why I had that specific numbers, because I want to do what you're doing. And I was like, what's the problem? Why is this not working for me? And he basically said, if you want to become someone who's capable of making $50,000, if you want to make $50,000 a month, you have to become someone who is capable of making $50,000 a month. What have you done to earn the right to do that? What skills have you mastered? What are you a professional at? What are you a rock star at? Why would people be willing to pay you that amount of money? And that was the light bulb moment for me where I realized, okay, this has nothing to do with an opportunity. These guys are going from company to company and making 6-7 figures everywhere they go. And I'm failing everywhere I go. The difference is in the knowledge and the skill sets. So with that being said, I asked myself a very specific question. How would I really enjoy building this business? Because by this time I had learned how to recruit and sponsor people over the phone, call leads and like sell people, which took me, again, 5 years to figure out how to do. But I hated it. Like I absolutely hated it. And I was like, if this is what it's going to take and what I've got to do for the next 20 years of my life, I don't want to do this. So is there a way for me to actually build a network marketing business in a way that I would find fun and enjoyable? And the answer that I came up with was, if I could get 20 to 30 people a day to call me or email me, they've already heard all about the business, they've already heard all about the product, they're already sold on it, and they're either ready to just give me their sign-up information, or maybe they have a question or two, but they're basically ready to join my team, and that's all I've got to do is welcome them, then awesome, I would love to do that. So I've really found that asking yourself the right questions is what leads to the direction and the path that your life takes. The questions you ask yourself are everything. And asking that question changed my life completely, because now I had to go figure out how to actually pull that off and make it happen. And that led me to the direct response industry with people like Dan Kennedy. And when I started looking at that, I was like, man, these guys are writing sales letters and putting them in magazines or putting them on a web page or in an email. And they might be 10, 15, 20 pages long. And they're selling products virtually by literally saying, mail a stamped envelope here, or go here and enter your payment information, or call this operator. And they're never talking to anyone, and they're making millions of dollars a year. So knowing that was possible was just a huge wake-up call. And I was like, well, how are they doing that? Okay, they mastered a skill called copywriting. I went and I started buying every book and course I could on that, and essentially learned how to write lead generation pages online, learned how to write a sales pitch online for the business. And I would just say, hey, go read this. If this sounds like an opportunity to you or something you'd like to do and you're ready to get started, call me back. And that letter might be 20 pages long, and it would tell the story of the business, the product, the opportunity, the compensation plan, the objections, the questions, and everything that I would normally have to talk about on the telephone. And that worked. It worked really well. And in fact, it changed my life, and it made me the #1 distributor in my company again within the next year. And what was really interesting about that is that it gave me leverage. Now with the Google AdWords and the internet, I could put that sales presentation in front of 1,000 people a day, where my, upline sponsors who were so successful in that industry might only be able to do 10 phone calls a day, because each phone call might last an hour or 2 hours. So now I'm making 1,000 pitches a day and they're making 10, and I'm doing it without speaking to anybody. So while my essential virtual sales team is, making these sales pitches all day long around the world, I'm now working on the next part of my business, which was to write a training book that I called Magnetic Sponsoring. That was for my team. And so I started selling that book for $39 a copy online. This is in 2005. It's one of the first kind of digital products way back then. And within 3 months, I was making $50,000 a month just selling that ebook. Within 2 years, I was making $500,000 a month selling other courses and building my networking business. And within a few years after that, that business made a total of around 25 million in revenue, and I sold it to a friend.
You know, it's so crazy. I'll share for everybody to have context. You're describing the genesis of the world that I stepped into in the fall of 2008 when I got started. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally the sales letter that enrolled me into the business model of what I ended up becoming an affiliate of was called the Coffee House Letter, which I
wrote.
At least they credited it to you. I'm assuming
I wrote that. I wrote that at a coffee shop, Austin Java here in Austin. That's why I called it the Coffee House Letter.
And it was a brilliant piece of copywriting that in its case articulated a specific explanation of a specific business model that was kind of almost like an anti-MLM business model. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That just, landed with this broke jazz musician and was like, mm-hmm. Oh, leverage, infinite scalability. Like, this makes sense. I could do this. And thankfully you helped me pay off my debt in the next year. Almost $500,000 in debt I paid off in about 18 months.
Awesome.
Because I said yes to one of your sales letters. It's
awesome.
Actually crazy. And then one of the first other things that I became an affiliate of was your magnetic sponsoring mm-hmm. Series. And it's just cool to, you're taking me back. But, what I hope people hear in this little retelling of that story is writing good sales copy and getting really good at these marketing skills. It's not just cool because it helps you make money, or in this case, helped Mike make money. It actually positively changes lives because you changed my life.
Well, look at the ripple, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I've learned these skills and, I pay them forward too.
Yep. Yeah, the ripple's amazing. That's the best part about what we do is the people like you and the other folks who've gone on to build 8, even 9-figure businesses that started with that little ebook, has touched literally hundreds of millions of lives and just circled the globe dozens of times over the last 15 years now, which is just unbelievable. I wrote that not knowing if a single person would buy it. It was never spell checked. I did the cover art myself in like Microsoft Paint or something stupid like that. And I had it printed at Kinko's. So, a lot of people get hung up on how they're going to be judged or if their information is going to be valuable. Just do it. Like, imagine if I had not published that ebook, like that whole industry would be completely different. My life would be different. Your life would be different. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I can say this as an empirical fact. If Mike Dillard doesn't write that book and that sales letter, Jeff Lerner never meets his wife and doesn't have his kids. Because I met my wife through the affiliate marketing industry at an event that I wouldn't have been able to go to, and I would have been out of the business if I ever even got into it, if it weren't for, it's just crazy, like you're talking about, the ripple effect. So, and I think what's interesting, and this is not a unique story to you, is that the network marketing industry, like I'm not in love with the network marketing industry.
No, and we can cons. Yeah.
And I know you're not.
Yeah. We can talk about why I moved on too and why you did. I'm not a huge fan of it either, but that's where my story started. So
But here's what I have observed about network marketing is their emphasis on personal development. Mm-hmm. And for a certain group of people that choose, like you did, to get really good at it, their emphasis on direct response marketing and leverage and systems and automation and that kind of thing becomes the starting point for a lot of people who go on to do a lot of other things. Because frankly, MLM is really hard. And to make that work, you're having to learn skills that will translate if you go, it doesn't matter if you go sell cars or sell copiers or, write sales letters for other, like Dan Kennedy, sales guru for hire. Like, a lot of people get their start there.
100%. I look at it as kind of like a training school for entrepreneurship, because you have to learn so many skills. And essentially, I look at it as a mirror. That industry will show you where your weaknesses are in a brutal way. It forces you to face the fact. It forced me to face the fact that I was scared to death to talk to people. I was scared to death to talk to people on the phone. I was scared to death to sell. I was chasing opportunity instead of skills. And every time I kept trying to succeed in that industry, I would I would just get knocked down again in this ruthless manner until I finally faced and acknowledged those shortcomings and addressed them. And so that to me was the most valuable part of my experience in that industry is it's a brutal teacher, but if you'll embrace those lessons, you'll come out of it with a crazy skill set.
You know, the other thing I learned from, and when I got started, it was affiliate marketing. It was, you know, what I came to understand as top tier direct sales. But earlier, probably around the same time you were struggling with network marketing, I was struggling with network marketing, although in a different way, because I've always had this switch that I can flip where I suddenly get really gregarious and I just really enjoy the conversation and the energy exchange. And, but what I found is you talk about MLM being a mirror. It's a mirror for you. It's also like kind of a mirror for the world. And here's what I learned from MLM. I was in an MLM for 2 months. I personally recruited 20 people in that first month. So I was like a stud. I mean, this guy brought in 20 people in his first month. And then I took my second month to focus on helping them duplicate. Those 20 people collectively combined recruited one person.
Yeah.
And what I realized from that is like, you can't want it more for other people than they want it for themselves.
Yeah.
And that was what the lesson that I took from that. And that ultimately, you know, it's like the airplane, man. You put your own air mask on and you try to help other people, but everybody's kind of responsible for their own outcome. So anyways, okay. So fast forward, you've done magnetic sponsoring. You've made enough money now to where certainly you're not working at PF Chang's anymore. You're probably not stressed about the same things that you were. And where'd you go from there?
So I was around 30 at that point, and this was around the year 2008-ish, 8, 9. So we saw the market crash of 08 happen. I'm in my 20s, making millions of dollars a year. I don't have any idea what to do with the money other than to buy cars and stupid stuff that a single guy in his 20s would buy. But I saw the market crash. And then I turned 30, and that's kind of a wake-up call for the next phase of your life. You're an official adult at that point, right? Mm-hmm. And so I realized I needed to figure out how this whole money thing worked. And I went to book people here in Austin, and I went to the finance investing section. And every book I looked at that point in time, which is probably 2009, was completely irrelevant at that point because the paradigm had shifted, right? If you did what any of these books said, you just lost half of your money, your portfolio in the market crash. So I realized that the wealthy, really truly wealthy people do different things with their money than even the upper middle class do. If you're investing with a bank or an investment firm, whatever it may be, that your neighbors are investing with in any kind of suburban environment, you're essentially in the retail financial space, you are getting screwed. You are the fuel for the wolves on Wall Street, right? You're the food. And the wealthy know this. And when I say wealthy, I'm talking about people who are worth and have at least $50 million, $100 million employed and invested, if not more. And so I realized that there's these two different groups of people, and one people invest this way and one people invest this way. And I was like, okay, I clearly want to go figure out how to invest like the rich, because they got even richer during the crash of 08 while everybody else got poor. And I couldn't find any resources on how to do that. And I realized that most people who are super wealthy, one, they don't talk about it. They're not writing books about it. The closest you could come to was like a Robert Kiyosaki and what he was doing, but he didn't get specific enough. Go invest in cash flow real estate and reduce your taxes. Okay, sounds great, but how do you do that, right? And so I could not find the solution to my problem. So I decided to just create it. And I said, I want to figure out how to invest like the rich. I'm going to do that by just interviewing the wealthy people around me in my inner circle. And I want to ask them how they do what they do. So I started a new company called The Elevation Group. I launched that in December of 2010. It was a very simple business. It was $97 a month, $597 for the year. And essentially I would do one video interview, usually in person in Austin, diving into a specific investment strategy. Maybe it's oil and gas, maybe it's gold and silver, maybe it's stocks, maybe it's life insurance, whatever it may be. I just wanted to figure this world out. And I was essentially treating it like a diary. And I was documenting what I was investing in, who I was investing with. And I essentially just invited people to come on this journey with me. And they did. We had over 8,600 people join in the first 7 days of the business. We did $3.2 million in sales in our first week. That turned into an 8-figure, $10 million plus business in the first year, and kind of just took on a life of its own. It was the perfect message and solution at the perfect time, kind of a zeitgeist moment. But yeah, so that was really the next chapter of my career. I said goodbye to the network marketing industry. I left that in 2010. Have never participated in that again, turned into financial education for a couple of years. And then left that business in 2014 and moved into hydroponics, so completely different industry.
Yeah. And I want to ask you about your hydroponics experience, because I've read about it, but real quick, I mean, on Elevation Group, first of all, great timing, great. And I was well, if I'm being honest, I wasn't a subscriber, but I had someone else's login. I don't know if I want to tell you that, but there, it's out. But me and someone else essentially shared a subscription, and it was great. I mean, it's cool because, well, actually, let me ask: is Elevation Group still functioning in its?
Yeah, so I left it to my business partner that I brought on during that business, and when I left in 2014, and then he sold it about a year and a half later to a gentleman named Brian, who runs it to this day. Mm-hmm. And now that the economy has, we've seen a pretty big crash with everything that's going on this year, that business has taken off once again. They're doing really well. So yeah, it lives on to this day.
Yeah, I can say that, in the last, let's say 5 or 6 years since I've started to have enough money to have these concerns, I literally use a ton of what I learned from Elevation Group, a lot of the strategies, and it really, it's not your business anymore, so it's not like you need an endorsement, but I will say, that stuff, that what you're saying is true. There's a whole other world of financial information and financial intelligence that they don't talk about at bank. You go sit down with your banker at Wells Fargo, and he starts talking about an annuity, and he starts talking about a CD, and like super rich people, they just laugh.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I realized very early on in that business is, why would you ever take financial advice from someone who's worth less than you?
Yeah.
I want to take financial advice from someone who's worth $100 million or more. And that's it. And so the retail financial world is meant to suck you dry with fees and zero responsibility, zero fiduciary responsibility. Most people don't even know what the word fiduciary means, let alone are they working with a fiduciary. And so, yeah, it's you either become aware of the matrix or you're food for it.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
So you became educated about that stuff. I assume at that point you had a pretty decent idea of how to stabilize your wealth. And then you moved into hydroponics. And again, I'm asking because I know some of the story and it's super interesting. Can you share a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I tend to get bored with my businesses as soon as I solve the problem I set out to solve. So in magnetic sponsoring, as soon as I became the number one distributor for my company and made millions of dollars and taught the industry everything I learned in the process and how I did that, which took about 5 years, I was bored. I had nothing else to give. Everything I possibly had to offer was documented and available online in the form of a book or a course or something. So when you hit that point, there's no more vision past that. Because frankly, when I had that original vision, I never thought I'd get to. I never thought I'd get there. That's like thinking you're going to go climb a hilltop and you end up at the top of Everest, and you're like, well, now what? Right. And so, I lost interest and got bored. I needed a new challenge. Moved into EVG in order to do that. Once I figured out, the finance stuff to my satisfaction. Same type of thing happened, lost interest in that, And so I really, after 10 years of essentially being in the online education industry, I wanted to challenge myself as an entrepreneur in a completely new way. And I wanted to essentially develop a physical product instead of a digital one. I wanted to develop a technology product. I wanted to do it in a completely different industry where no one knew my name and where I didn't have any previous contacts, really just to see if I could do it. And so, I always sit down and what's the biggest problem that I have in my life right now? Where do I think I can serve and help people or solve the problem? And I lived right across the street from the Whole Foods headquarters in downtown Austin. And I'd go there basically every day. And I eat healthy. And you go into Whole Foods and you buy organic produce. It's expensive. I used to juice a lot, and it would cost I'd walk out with $100 worth of produce and greens, for 2 or 3 days worth of juicing. And I was like, this is insane. Like, you have to actually be in the 1% just to eat food that's not covered in poison.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really messed up. And at the time I was really a fan of Peter Diamandis' work, and how he was talking about disrupting and decentralizing all of these industries, with Uber decentralizing, taxis and transportation, Airbnb disrupting, decentralizing the hotel industry. Then we have Odesk for engineering and web development work, Etsy for selling your products and wares. And I was like, why hasn't anyone decentralized the ag industry yet? Because if you can get rid of all of the stuff in the middle between the farm and you consuming the food off your plate, you reduce the cost by 90+%. And so to me, that was a really cool vision. I was like, I want to put an automated organic farm in everybody's kitchen, and I want to take all of this agricultural land that's getting polluted with glyphosate, that's getting, hundreds of millions of gallons of water just wasted as it's thrown into the soil and evaporated, as these plants that are covered in poison are now pulled up by farmers, put on 18-wheeler trucks and ships, and polluting the environment as they cross the country. And then, ending up in a distribution center, which now requires packaging and more plastic and paper and cardboard, and then ultimately to end up in a grocery store for 10 times the price than it costs to produce. What if I could fix that problem? It would be a game-changing opportunity. And so I got really excited by the idea of doing that. I had zero experience in anything that business had to do with. So hydroponics, farming, technology development, product development. I've never done any of it before. So I literally jumped on Amazon, started buying books on hydroponics. I started cold calling industrial design firms in Austin, and I went on 99 Designs, I think, or Odesk. And I had somebody take a Voss water bottle, the cylinder glass water bottle. And I said, Photoshop the label out, put that water bottle into this kitchen that I bought, the photograph for in the background, and then fill the middle with plants and put a logo on it that says Evergrow on the top. So I paid a dude like $50 to do that. And I had this image of basically the concept that I could then send to these industrial design firms. And I said, this is what I want to build. Can you help me do that? And I eventually partnered with a company called Whipsaw in Silicon Valley, who's done some really big products, and they're all very modern looking. It looks like, Apple designed them basically. And we started a 3 to 4 year journey on creating the world's first automated hydroponic robot or farm for your house. And the original estimate was that it would cost about $500,000 to produce. 3 years later, we're well over $1 million, 3 years of time. And we've got a working prototype in my living room, and that's it, because it was so much more difficult than anybody ever anticipated. It was really fun from a problem-solving perspective. I got to push my brain in really new and creative ways that I never had an opportunity to do before. But going back now, man, I would have done things really, really, really differently, because it was a school of hard knocks for sure. I call it the stupid tax, when you pay for the experience and knowledge that you do not have, and you pursue the path in spite of that lack of knowledge, you're going to end up paying the stupid tax. And I paid that in a very big way.
Yeah. And I was, at that point I was a fan, I was on your list. So I was able to kind of track that journey, as you went through it. And you've always done a really cool job. Not that it's necessarily a responsibility, but you've chosen to do a really cool thing, which is like document your journey, for better or for worse, right? It's not, you're not only writing about your wins, which we all appreciate.
Yeah.
And there's so much vicarious learning that happens through that. And we appreciate you blazing these trails so that we can.
That came from the networking industry. You know, that was inspired by my experience in the beginning of the networking industry when I was failing. And it's like, all these guys are telling me this is so easy and this is all you got to do. And then as I finally succeeded, and I was like, this is so much more difficult and involved than anyone ever told me. I know why they didn't tell me now, because if I did, I would have never, no one would ever start down this business if they really showed you what they were doing and the amount of work and time and effort they put in. And that really pissed me off. And so I just told myself, I was like, I'm never going to do that during my career. I'm always going to tell people the reality of the situation and give proper expectations. And failing is a big part of that. And the challenges that come up are a huge part of that. So, yeah, you just document. If your true intent is to be of service, you have to document the good, the bad, and the ugly, or you're just lying to people. Mm-hmm. And that's just the philosophy that I've taken in my career.
So I want to kind of get the story all the way through, and then I want to sort of dissect the story and, kind of figure out what makes Mike Mike. But so you do the hydroponics thing. Ultimately, I think you sold that business, or
so 3 years in,
changing directions.
3 years in, it was getting unbelievably painful to put more cash into this. And I basically said, hey guys, how much longer is this going to take and how much more is this going to cost to get this to market? And they were like, probably another $2 million in another 2 years. Because right now we had a prototype, but we hadn't started tooling. I didn't even know what tooling was at the time. We hadn't started packaging design. We hadn't started delivery logistics. We hadn't even thought about we thought about it, but we hadn't had any real discussions or planning on how we were going to provide support for these refrigerator-sized appliances. We hadn't even started on the website, or the mobile app. And so we had so much more work to do. And at the same time, a competing company called Click and Grow, which was backed by Y Combinator, they had, 24 employees, tens of $millions in funding. They'd already been around for about 7 years. Had a little desktop planter that grew 3 plants at a time, right? Your basil, your thyme, and your mint and things like that. It was kind of a novelty. And I was like, these guys just don't get it. That's cool that you can grow your basil and your mint, but if we built a bigger platform that could replace somebody's run to the grocery store, we can essentially replace the farm. Well, lo and behold, at that same time when I'm having these difficult discussions, they launched 3 new products that grow 9 plants, I think 34 plants and 51 plants. And their system, frankly, was a better design than ours. It was more elegant. It had less moving parts, less technology. And so their retail price was going to be about a third that ours would be. And as a marketer, I'm sitting here already doing the side-by-side comparison box on the website,
right,
where they're winning every category. And I'm like, that's a bad position to be in. So I called up the founder after talking to a lot of my mentors, and I'm like, hey, I'm at a crossroads here. I've either got to go raise a bunch of money, or I've got to abandon the product, or I've got to do plan C, and I don't know what that is. And plan C ended up, asking yourself again, the question becomes the answer, which is, how do you turn lemons into lemonade? How do you turn this potential failure into a win? And so I did that by calling up Matthias, who was the founder of Click and Grow. And I just said, hey, I'd love to figure out a way to work together. We're pursuing the same goal and the same mission. And what we ended up doing is they had a bridge round open very early in the company. And so I wrote them a 6-figure check, invested in them, closed down Evergrow, wrote the whole thing off as a loss for tax purposes, and posted a 25-minute video about the entire story. You can go watch on my YouTube channel. And now they're crushing it. Like, they're having record sales, and I will most likely, when that company has an exit, make back the 7+ figures I put into Evergrow, and come out the better end of the deal. So yeah, that was the full story on that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, cool, and kudos on, that incessant pursuit of the better question and the better answer and the ultimate outcome, which, like you say, turns lemons into lemonade, and seems to be a pretty common trait among successful entrepreneurs. Like, we keep going when other people would throw up their hands. That's kind of the difference.
Well, that's the trap that I could have fallen into. The trap that I could have fallen into was being driven by ego, being unwilling to accept the fact that I'd made some bad decisions or made some mistakes around how I pursued this business, and kept going and pushing myself and pushing myself and pushing myself until I either had a heart attack or went bankrupt or whatever. And that's the most common path, because most entrepreneurs, especially after you've had a taste of success, there's some ego around that, and you don't want to fail publicly. And if you think about it, I've been involving my entire audience of hundreds of thousands of people along this journey. And now I have to publicly come out and say that I'm pulling the plug on it. Most people aren't going to do that. And so the biggest lesson that I think I can share for folks who are listening to this is, don't fall into that trap. Be willing to know when it's time to retreat, and you learned some really valuable lessons, and now you can come at it from a more educated standpoint in round 2 if you want to take on a new venture, instead of having an unwillingness to back off and just die on your own sword, because that doesn't serve anybody at all. So
yeah, I love the way you have framed it, kind of this whole conversation about it's asking different questions, or considering the question, not just seeking the answer. Because when I say keep going, you're right. I don't mean keep going to answer the question that's been asked. I mean, keep going to find the right question and thus the right answer. Like, essentially it's, how do I make a win out of this? Have you ever read The Dip by Seth Godin?
No, I've heard of it. Probably the book that's most similar to me is by Keith Cunningham, The Road Less Stupid.
I've never read that. I've heard about it. I've never read it.
Keith Cunningham is, known for being the Rich Dad in Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad books. He's a world-class entrepreneur in Austin, and he went bankrupt at 40 years old, lost $100 million in real estate, and rebuilt it all back in the second chapter of his life. And the book, The Road Less Stupid, is all about being very deliberate in the questions you ask yourself and how you think about what you actually want to accomplish, what your goals are. Because for both his career and my career, if we could just unwind one or two mistakes that we made, we would be ridiculously wealthy, right? Well into the hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's just those one or two mistakes that if we just avoided those and not made those decisions, we would have saved all of that, carnage. And the only way to avoid that is through a very deliberate thinking process, which is what he teaches in that book.
I think that's why Warren Buffett's first rule is don't lose money.
Yeah.
You set yourself back for decades.
Right.
On the compounding curve. Okay. So that's how that story kind of wound up. And then from there, was that about when you started dealing with your health challenges?
Yeah. Ironically, the hydroponic system could have been, or probably was, a big contributor to why I got sick. So I in 2018 suffered a brain injury, which we didn't know the cause of till about a year later, which ended up being a severe toxic mold infection. And, the building that we were in downtown always had AC problems. It was a brand new high-rise tower in downtown Austin. And when the AC goes out and it produces condensation in the vents, and then we live in the southern United States, as soon as somebody opens a window or whatever, mold spores take root in that, and it starts to grow in the AC ducts. And then I have a hydroponic system in my living room that's circulating water filled with nutrients, that's covered in dark. It's like Uber environment for growing mold. I think essentially that was what happened. And I'm one of the 20% of the population that's missing the gene that is required to detox your body from mold. And so that built up until it literally caused a brain injury. And it's been now just over 2 years of recovery, and I'm still working through that. But so the last 2 years has been a completely different adventure. I really haven't worked much. And it's been a healing journey. It's been an emotionally healing journey, a physically healing journey, lots of plant medicine work, lots of alternative therapies, and a very pivotal chapter in my life from the growth that has come from it. And also by far and away, the single most difficult, because it pushed me to my brink in every capacity. So it's been an interesting couple of years for sure.
Yeah. And it's crazy. I mean, gratefully in hindsight, there's a positive outcome and a really a pretty moving story of how you dealt with that, how you worked through it, and essentially how you kept doing. I think this is becoming the theme for this conversation, is you kept asking different questions until you ultimately got to a question that could have a good answer. Like, I know people with, debilitating health conditions that just kind of hit a point of resignation, and it's just about how do I manage this with medication?
Right. Yeah.
And I have to imagine, I mean, how frustrated were you through that?
More than, well, to the point of suicide. Yeah, frankly, when you can't, so my particular symptom was that I physically could not fall asleep. And I don't mean like insomnia, trouble falling asleep. I mean, I went 7 days and nights without a single minute of sleep until I basically drugged myself with pharmaceuticals to knock myself out, and I might get 60 minutes of sleep and then I'd be up again. And then you're taking care of a child, you're running a business, you have $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a month in expenses and overhead you have to keep going. And when you don't have any sleep for weeks and months at a time, that takes away your brain's capacity to think, your memory, you fall into depression. And when you don't know what the cause is, that was the worst part, because I'm going through this for a year and nobody can tell me what's wrong. I can't find any information on Google. I can't find anybody with similar symptoms or problems on YouTube. I've gone to a dozen doctors. Nobody can tell me what it is. And they say, I've never seen anything like this before. And that's when you run into issues, because the key to essentially overcoming a health challenge is hope, right? If you don't have hope, then that's when things go really dark. And that changed for me when I met someone at a friend's house at an event that I just happened to go to, and dragged myself over there. And I just randomly met this woman, Christina, and she asked me, what was going on in my life. And I told her, and she's like, oh my God, the same thing happened to me 5 years ago. And it was the same thing. She felt the click in her head and physically couldn't fall asleep again. Ended up in the hospital on life support. And she ultimately made it out. Her issue was heavy metal, super high heavy metal levels. Mine was mold, so both biotoxins basically. But that was the turning point, because meeting her gave me hope, and I could see that she made it through. I finally found one person on the entire planet who knew what I was going through and experiencing, and could have empathy and understanding for that. And obviously she had resources. So she had a doctor she could point me to, and that eventually led me to find Dr. Shippey, who is a functional medicine doctor here in Austin that specializes in mold. She gave me my first mycotoxin test that came back. The mycotoxin test basically goes from a scale from 0 to 50, and anything above 5 is toxic, right? 0 to 5, you're okay. Anything above 5 to 50, it's toxic. You need to get out of your body. Mine came back at 21,000. So that was the big turning point. And so, man, it's just, you can't give up. I've learned so many lessons from this. I have to write a book about this at some point, because people who are going through health challenges like that just need hope more than anything else. They need to know that somebody's made it through it. And what's really interesting, Jeff, is the tools that we've learned all the way back to network marketing, but through the personal development we've done, affirmations, positive thinking, meditation, all of that stuff is what got me through this period. And you have to think that the average normal person has never even heard of those tools. We take them for granted. For us, it's kind of like 101 entrepreneurship. Most people, 95% of society, have never heard of journaling or affirmations or positive mindset or meditation or, transcendental or any of that stuff. And so imagining that they're going through their challenges without those tool sets is insane to me. So I definitely need to write a book at some point that will provide those tools to the wider world of folks who are going through health issues.
Yeah, it is such a crazy story. And to your point, I think about the way I deal with challenges and adversity now, and it's all driven and derived from what I've learned as an entrepreneur. Because entrepreneur basically means shit's going to happen every day. And you become so conditioned to adapting and stress and response and dealing with challenges that it's kind of like the SEALs say, like train for the worst conditions you could possibly find yourself in. That's kind of what entrepreneurs are doing all the time, right? We're just getting really comfortable with
solving problems.
Solving problems, yeah. So, okay, and then if you could share, so it sounds like, are you kind of coming out of that health challenge phase and looking for your new big thing, or what?
Yeah, I've made huge progress. So I'm probably 80% better, 8 out of 10. We're still dealing with it. I've had to move 3 times in 12 months. We finally moved into a brand new construction home here last week. And so the key to healing from mold is you have to get out of the exposure. And unfortunately, in the southern United States, 80 to 90% of homes that are more than 5 years old have mold in them. Just if they've had a leak or whatever, there's mold in them. So we bought a brand new construction home, and you have to put a bunch of technology in the central AC system to keep it dry and to keep it sterile, which we have here. So literally, we've been in here a week, and I think this is going to be the turning point for a full recovery. Talking to the other friends who've gone through this experience that I've met since then, that was really when things, they finally got fully better, was after they really took control of their environment. So yeah, my goal is 12 months from now, I'll be fully back to 100% and rocking and rolling.
You've mentioned 2 things in this conversation that I appreciate because they kind of support something I say a lot that's not always super popular. But you mentioned, having to put this equipment in your home right now. Pretty sure that's not covered by any insurance policy.
None of this is. It's been, thank God, I've had the financial means to take care of this, and frankly, and have an email list. If I didn't have my email list, I wouldn't have made it through this endeavor the last 2 years.
Because you couldn't really work.
No, couldn't work.
Money.
Couldn't work, but again, still have employees and bills to pay, and so I basically made it through that period just recycling promotions for my previous products before I got sick to my email list, and thankfully that got the job done. But yeah, with this particular health challenge, none of it's covered by insurance, and I probably spend $2,000 to $3,000 a month on supplements, blood work, and doctor visits. So it's all cash, and it's probably 6 figures at this point. And for people who are not in that position, there's definitely ways to get through it, but having financial security and the ability to do that was super critical. So yeah.
And you even mentioned and I talk about this all the time, like just going to buy organic produce.
Yeah.
Whole Foods is cost prohibitive for a lot of people. And why do I have a show called Millionaire Secrets? Why do I have a company that teaches digital entrepreneurship? Because I have 2 strong beliefs. One is most people don't have enough money. They're never going to retire the way they think they are or the way they'd like to. And 2, to your point, you have to have an easier way to generate cash flow when you need to. And having an email list of 500,000 people that you can send an offer to and, make whatever it is, 80 grand in a week, that's a pretty clutch thing when you need it.
Yeah, no, literally. And that's inspiring in a whole next chapter of my career, which is going to be focusing on helping people build audiences and building a relationship with that audience and turning that into a business, because that literally saved my life. So yeah, so that's kind of the next chapter of where I'm headed.
Yeah. So I want to circle back to that because I want my audience to be able to go into your world and
Sure.
go where you're headed and be a part of it if they choose. Because I can, again, I mean, I interview a lot of really cool people, but in your case, I can personally say like, yeah, get into Mike's world. Good things will come of it because I'm living proof of that. But so rolling back through that entire story though, I want to try to like pinpoint something. Man, you've done a really consistent job. Not a good job. I mean, it was a good job, but it was a good job done consistently over 25 years now of asking, like you said, asking really good questions, solving problems, keeping going in a way that's very high energy. I mean, it takes a lot to build these businesses. And you said you didn't come from an entrepreneurial family. Mm-hmm. Where did this spark come from? How did Mike, why was Mike?
Always highly competitive. So I was competing by the time I was 3 or 4 years old in like BMX races and with training wheels and stuff. So just born competitive. And then two, frankly, being bullied in middle school and high school. I was the smallest kid in my school, a little bit different, I think more mature than the average kid at the time. And so I think kids found that intimidating, and they also found me tiny, which made me a target. And so I was relentlessly bullied for 6 years. And I really had a choice at that time, which was, I think when that happens to a kid, you either abuse yourself because you don't know why it's happening and you believe what's going on. And so you maybe go turn to drugs or, join the wrong kind of crowd or whatever it may be. Or you decide that, you know what, I'm going to prove these people wrong and I'm going to let success be the best revenge. And I don't know where I heard that, but I heard that somewhere, when I was in middle school, and I was like, that sounds like a smarter route to take. I think I'm going to do that. That sounds like more fun. Mm-hmm. So to be super transparent and honest with everybody, that at the beginning of my career was the primary driver, which was to say, F you, I'm going to show you guys. And I did. And so that worked and was fulfilling until, again, about mid-30s, early 30s. And then obviously that loses its shine after, you have kids and a family and you grow up. And so now the motivation is very different. Now it's really just to do the best that I can with the time that I have here. And hopefully that's a long time and I get to do a lot of good, but my results speak for themselves at this point. I have nothing else to prove. And so now I really just get to enjoy the process of entrepreneurship and creation, and doing what I want to do instead of having some kind of ulterior agenda internally, behind that drive.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. I mean, that answer of bullying or feeling, alienated or ostracized, basically not fitting in,
not good enough is the most common description I've heard for myself and many, many, many other entrepreneurs.
Yeah. I mean, you have a show where you interview ridiculously successful people all the time. That's a consistent theme, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's been my experience doing whatever, 80 or 90 of these interviews now. I mean, it's people grew up in a broken home. I was bullied. The girl I was on her podcast earlier this morning, she was bullied. It was just like,
yeah,
people that don't have it good enough, I say, well, that's probably because you never had it bad enough.
Yeah, that's the interesting part about it is you don't see many entrepreneurs who grew up in a healthy childhood.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny.
Because to succeed in this industry, the amount of effort, drive, and determination it takes, for me, those 5 or 6 years of just failing over and over again, most people just quit. They're like, I'm going to go back to my other thing. I'm comfortable. Mm-hmm. That kind of drive is very rare, and it has to be usually from a source of pain, because pain is the biggest motivator. That's why you typically don't, again, find happy kids who turn into hugely successful entrepreneurs. They just don't have that level of drive.
Yeah. So true. So well said. So, if you're hearing this and you're like, hey, I've got pain. I connect with these feelings they're talking about. Well, good. Use it. It's a strength. Lean into it.
That's the most valuable thing you have.
Find your motivation in whatever you need to. I'm not above saying when I got started online, man, I was on a mission to prove my ex-wife's dad wrong because he thought I was a loser. Mm-hmm. He thought his daughter would have been better off without me, which maybe she is. I don't know. But the point is, I was going to prove. I rode that wave for years, like probably 5 years. Because literally, I'd go to sleep at night just thinking about this one guy who made one comment to me. He was actually a really nice guy, but he made one comment to me one time. And it propelled me for 5 years of affiliate marketing.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny like that. Anyway, so I'm glad to know I'm not alone in that.
Well, so look at Elon Musk too, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. Got his beat. He got beat bad.
Yeah. And he talks that was his motivation.
So how can people go get more Mike Dillard in their life?
MikeDillard.com. That's the main holding page right now. There's a little spot you can join the email list. And, frankly, I just do the weekly podcast at this point, and we have some cool stuff that will come out next year, but that'd be the place to go. Cool.
So check out MikeDillard.com. Do you have any offers open right now? Any products you're pushing?
Mike Dillard Mentoring is a 52-week long mentoring program that we're taking students through right now. And that's kind of my parting gift, if you will, to the entrepreneur industry. My goal is to make the most valuable mentoring program I can. I know that's something you're doing and super passionate about as well. And so that's been a couple of years in the making, and we have students going through that right now. And it's something I'm super proud of.
And they can learn more about that on your site?
MikeDillardMentoring.com would probably be the place to go for that.
And just get on your list. I mean, I'm on your list, and you keep everyone abreast of everything. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Mike, this has just been epic, man. I'm so glad
Thank you, brother,
to get to connect in this way.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been awesome. I hope people will find some gems in this and use it to move themselves forward for sure. And we'll keep the ripple going.
Amen. I know they will. So thanks again for being on Millionaire Secrets. Thank you to all you millionaire secret seekers out there for being a part of our audience and a part of my world. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for watching Millionaire Secrets. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and leave us a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you know whenever we release a new episode. Also, if you want to learn the fastest way to become a millionaire in the new economy, click the link in the description below to claim your free copy of my book, The Millionaire Shortcut. And don't forget, Millionaire Secrets is available on all the major podcast platforms as well. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you can listen on the go. Thanks for watching.